I overheard my son on the phone with his wife. I hope the wail of my mother doesn't come to dinner. She always devours all our food. I pretended not to hear. I just called an old colleague. 5 minutes later, my son called me in despair. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. The word wail hit me like a physical blow. Before we continue, comment where you're watching from and subscribe to channel. We'd love to see how far our stories are reaching. Even though I was standing in my own kitchen holding a dish towel that suddenly felt too heavy in my hands, Daniel's voice carried clearly from the living room where he thought I couldn't hear him talking to Nicole on speakerphone. She always shows up hungry and eats like she hasn't seen food in weeks. He continued. And Nicole's laughter tinkled through the phone like broken glass. Remember last Sunday when she went back for thirds? I thought the casserole dish was going to be empty. My chest tightened. Last Sunday the tuna casserole I had complimented Nicole on, even though it was bland and overcooked. I had taken a second helping because Nicole had asked if I liked it. And when I said yes, she'd encouraged me to have more. Please, Barbara, there's plenty, she had said with that bright smile of hers. I pressed myself against the kitchen counter, my heart hammering so hard I was sure they could hear it from the next room. Maybe we should start having dinner earlier, Nicole suggested. Like at 4:30. Tell her 5:30. By the time she gets there, we'll already be finishing up. Daniel laughed. You're terrible. But honestly, Mom does kind of dominate the table when she comes over. Remember when she told that long story about her grocery store checkout lady? Thought Emma was going to fall asleep in her mashed potatoes. The grocery store story I had been trying to connect with my granddaughters, sharing a funny interaction I'd had with Mrs. Chen at the checkout counter. Madison had giggled at the part about the coupon mix-up, and I thought I was entertaining them. Apparently I was just boring everyone to death. And the way she hovers around the kitchen while I'm trying to serve, Nicole added. I can't move without bumping into her. She's always asking if she can help, but then she just gets in the way. My hands were shaking now. Every Sunday for the past 3 years, I had arrived early to help Nicole with dinner preparations. She always said she appreciated the extra hands, always gave me small tasks, like setting the table or slicing bread. I thought we had developed a comfortable routine. I know she's lonely since Dad died, Daniel said, his voice softer now, but sometimes I feel like we're her only source of entertainment. It's a lot of pressure. For years. It had been 4 years since Harold died, not 3 like Daniel said. But who was counting? Apparently not my own son. Maybe we should start alternating weekends, Nicole suggested. Every other Sunday instead of every week. Give us some family time with just the 4 of us. The whale comment though, Daniel said. And I could hear him grinning. That was harsh even for you. You laughed, Nicole. Back. But she was laughing too. My legs felt weak. I groped for one of the kitchen chairs and sank into it, still clutching the dish towel. The whale. That's what they called me. Behind my back in their private moments. I wasn't Barbara or Mom or even that annoying woman who came to dinner every Sunday. I was the whale. How long had they been making jokes about me? How many times had they shared stories about my eating habits, my conversation attempts, my efforts to be part of their family? Many times had I been the punchline without knowing it. I thought about last Sunday's dinner. The way Nicole had photographed the table before we ate, positioning everyone just so. The way she'd quickly moved her phone when I reached for a dinner roll. Had she been documenting my eating for their private entertainment later? Anyway, Daniel was saying she probably won't even notice if we start spacing out the invitations. She's getting a bit forgetful these. Forgetful. Another label to add to whale and boring and in the way. He stood up abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. In the living room, Daniel's conversation stopped mid-sentence. "Mom, are you okay in there?" Cleared my throat. "Fine, sweetheart. Just cleaning up, but I wasn't fine. I was 63 years old, and my own son thought of me as a whale who devoured food and dominated conversations and got in the way of his perfect family life. My daughter-in-law, who smiled at me every Sunday and complimented my hair and asked about my week, privately mocked my eating habits and wanted to reduce my visits to every other weekend. I was a joke, a burden, an inconvenience to be managed." The phone rang, startling me out of my spiral of humiliation. I answered without looking at the caller ID, grateful for any distraction. "Barbara, is that you? You sound upset." Charles Morrison's voice was like a lifeline. My former boss, the senior partner at Morrison Klein and Associates, where I had worked as head bookkeeper for 30 years before retiring. I hadn't spoken to him in months. "Charles," I said, trying to inject normally into my voice. "How nice to hear from you. I was just thinking about you today, going through some old files. Listen, are you free this week? I have something I'd like to discuss with you. Some papers that need your attention. Papers, legal documents, something concrete and professional that had nothing to do with how much food I ate or how long my stories ran or how much space I took up in a kitchen." "Yes," I said quickly. "I'm free. When works for you? How about Thursday afternoon around 2? We could meet at the office and then perhaps grab coffee afterward. Love. Catch up." "That sounds perfect." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen listening to Daniel's voice resume in the living room. His conversation with Nicole continuing as if nothing had changed. But something had changed. For the first time in 4 years, someone had called me and wanted to see me for reasons that had nothing to do with family obligation or charity or making the best of an inconvenient situation. Someone remembered that I used to be more than just a whale who showed up for dinner every Sunday. But the damage was done. The word echoed in my head like a cruel song I couldn't turn off. Will. Each repetition felt like another pound added to my shame. Another reason to shrink myself smaller, take up less space, eat less food, tell shorter stories, ask fewer questions. I folded the dish towel with mechanical precision and hung it on the rack by the sink. Then I walked quietly to my bedroom and closed the door, leaving Daniel to finish his conversation about managing his whale of a mother. In 5 minutes he would call me. In 5 minutes, his world would shift in ways he couldn't imagine. But right now, in this moment, I needed to sit with the pain of learning exactly what I meant to the people I loved most in the world. The word whale followed me into my bedroom and settled into my bones like an old ache. Tomorrow I would call Charles back and confirm our meeting. Tomorrow, I would start remembering who I used to be before I became a punchline at my own son's dinner table. But tonight, I would just sit with the truth of what I had heard and let it hurt as much as it needed to. Thursday couldn't come fast enough. I spent 3 days replaying Daniel's words, each repetition making them sharper, more cutting. Tuesday morning, he called to confirm Sunday dinner as if nothing had happened. Just wanted to make sure you're still coming this weekend. Nicole's trying a new recipe. His voice was cheerful, normal. No trace of the man who had called me a whale just days before. Almost Ken led right then. Almost told him I had other plans, but the words stuck in my throat. Of course I heard myself saying, "What can I Bring. Nothing. Nothing. Just bring yourself. Just bring yourself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Apparently, bringing myself was already too much. Thursday afternoon, I arrived at Morrison Klein and Associates 15 minutes early. The office hadn't changed much in my 4 years of retirement. Same burgundy carpet, same mahogany reception desk, same oil paintings of stern-faced judges lining the hallway. But walking through those familiar doors felt like stepping back into a version of myself I had almost forgotten. Barbara, Judy, the current receptionist, jumped up from her desk. "Oh my goodness, look at you. You look wonderful." I didn't feel wonderful. Felt like a whale in a business suit. But Judy's enthusiasm seemed genuine. And for the first time in days I managed a real smile. Charles emerged from his office with arms outstretched. "Barbara, punctual as always, some things never change." He looked exactly the silver hair, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, that slight stoop. From years of bending over legal briefs. Charles had hired me 30 years ago when I was a young widow with basic bookkeeping skills and a desperate need for steady work. He had mentored me, promoted me, trusted me with the firm's most complex financial matters. Come in," he said, ushering me into his office. "Can I get you coffee?" Coffee would be lovely. As he poured from the small machine in the corner, I looked around his office. The same leather-bound law books, the same diplomas on the wall, the same crystal paperweight Harold had given him for his 60th birthday. Everything exactly as I remembered, as if time had stood still in this place where I used to matter. "I have to admit," Charles said, handing me a steaming mug, "the papers are just an excuse. The real reason I called is that I've been thinking about you. How are you doing, Barbara? Really doing?" Something in his tone made my carefully constructed composure wobble. "I'm fine," I said automatically. "Are you?" He settled behind his desk, fixing me with that gentle but penetrating look that had made him such an effective lawyer. "Because you sounded different on the phone. Not forgetful or boring or in the way, just sad. The simplicity of it, the accuracy of it nearly broke me. I suppose I've been feeling a bit lost lately," I admitted. Understandable. Retirement is a big adjustment, especially when you were as dedicated as you were. Do you remember the Hartwell case? 1998. He nodded. The Hartwell case had been a nightmare, a complicated divorce involving hidden assets and shell corporations. I had spent months untangling the financial web, working late nights and weekends to trace money trails and uncover concealed accounts. Your work on that case saved our client millions of dollars, Charles continued. And the Patterson bankruptcy in 2004. Your forensic accounting skills kept that family from losing everything they'd worked for. "I was just doing my job," I said quietly. "You were doing extraordinary work. You had a gift, Barbara. Still do, I imagine." He leaned forward. "That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about." My heart quickened. "Oh, I've been consulting on a pro bono case. A group of seniors who got scammed by a fraudulent investment scheme. They lost their life savings and the financial records are a mess. I need someone with your skills to help untangle it all." He paused. Interested. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than shame or sadness. Felt useful. "Tell me more." For the next hour, Charles outlined the case. 12 elderly victims, nearly $500,000 stolen, financial records deliberately obscured to hide the fraud. It was exactly the kind of complex puzzle I used to solve in my sleep. Of course it would be volunteer work, Charles said. But I know how much you used to enjoy the detective aspect of forensic accounting. I did enjoy it. Had loved the challenge of following money trails, of finding patterns hidden in columns of numbers, of bringing order to financial chaos. It had been one of the few areas of my life where I felt genuinely confident, genuinely skilled. When would you need an answer? Yes. No rush. Think it over. But Barbara, he hesitated. I hope you know how valuable you are. Your work here made a real difference in people's lives. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Had I been that transparent? Had my self-doubt been so obvious that Charles felt compelled to reassure me? The thought was both embarrassing and strangely comforting. After we said goodbye, I sat in my car in the parking garage for a long time, thinking about the woman I used to be. Barbara, the forensic accountant who could spot financial irregularities from across a spreadsheet. Barbara, the problem solver who stayed late to make sure everything balanced to the penny. Barbara, the mentor who trained 3 different bookkeepers and watched them all get promoted to better positions. When had I stopped being that woman? When had I become just the whale who showed up for Sunday dinner? The transformation hadn't happened overnight. It had been gradual, so slow I hadn't noticed it happening. After Harold died, I had thrown myself into being the perfect grandmother, the devoted mother, the woman who brought homemade cookies and never missed a birthday. Somewhere along the way, I had shrunk myself down to fit into the space my family was willing to give me. My phone rang, jolting me out of my thoughts. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. Mom, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for an hour. There was panic in his voice. Real fear. My maternal instincts kicked in immediately. I'm fine, sweetheart. I was in a meeting. What's wrong? A meeting? What kind of meeting? Just business. Daniel, what's happened? Are the girls okay? The girls are fine. He took a shaky breath. Mom, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me. Have I been a bad son? The question caught me completely off guard. What? No, of course not. Why would you ask that? 'Cause I've been thinking about Dad lately, about what he would think of how I treat you. My God. Mom, I think I've been awful. Closed my eyes. This was it. The conversation I both dreaded and desperately needed to have. Daniel, no, let me finish. Nicole and I were talking today and she said something that made me realize, made me see. His voice cracked. I love you, Mom. You know that, right? Whatever else has happened, whatever I've said or done, you know I love you. I know, I whispered. But love without respect was just sentiment. Love without consideration was just obligation. Love that reduced me to a punchline, a burden to be managed, a whale who devoured food and dominated conversations. That kind of love was almost worse than indifference because indifference at least was honest. Can we talk? Daniel asked. Really talk? Maybe not at Sunday dinner. Just the 2 of us. I thought about Charles's job offer, about the woman I used to be, about the choice I could make to reclaim some piece of my former self. Yes, I said we can talk, but Daniel, there are going to be some changes. The silence on the other end of the phone stretched long enough that I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Finally he spoke. What kind of changes? The kind that are long overdue. We met at Murphy's Diner on Saturday afternoon. I arrived first and chose a booth in the back corner, somewhere we could talk without interruption. The lunch rush was over, and the place had that comfortable, worn-in feeling of a restaurant that had been serving the same community for decades. Daniel looked terrible when he walked in. His usually neat hair was disheveled, his tie crooked, and there were dark circles under his eyes that made him look older than his 36 years. He slid into the booth across from me and immediately started fidgeting with his napkin. "I didn't sleep last night," he said without preamble. "I kept thinking about Dad, about what he'd say if he knew how I've been acting." The waitress came over and we ordered coffee for both of us, pie for me. I noticed Daniel's slight cease when I added the pie to my order, and I made a mental note of it. Even now, even in the middle of his apparent crisis of conscience, he was still monitoring what I ate. "Tell me about Dad," I said once the waitress left. "What do you think he'd say?" Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. "He'd be ashamed of me. He'd be furious that I let Nicole talk about you the way she does, that I joined in." "How does Nicole talk about me, Daniel?" He looked down at the table. "You know how she talks about you?" "No, I don't." "Not really. I heard some of it the other day, but I suspect there's more." The waitress brought our coffee and Daniel spent a long time adding sugar and cream, clearly stalling. Finally he met my eyes. "She calls you needy. She says you don't have any friends your own age because you're too dependent on family. She thinks you eat too much and talk too much and that you don't pick up on social cues." Each word was a small knife, but I kept my expression neutral. "And what do you say when she says these things?" "Sometimes I defend you," he said quickly. "But sometimes I don't. Sometimes I agree with her because it's easier than fighting about it." "What else?" He was quiet for a long time. The pie arrived and I took a deliberate bite, watching him watch me eat. "She thinks Sunday dinners are a burden," he said finally. "She says we're enabling your loneliness instead of encouraging you to build your own social life. She thinks we should cut back to once a month, maybe less." "And you? Do you think?" I think he started again. "Think I've been a coward. I think I've let my wife turn my mother into a problem to be solved instead of a person to be loved." It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. But it still wasn't enough. There was something else, something deeper, that he wasn't telling me. "The whale comment," I said quietly. "How long have you two been calling me that?" His face went white. "You heard that?" "Heard it." "How long, Daniel?" He stared into his coffee cup. "Couple of years maybe. It started as a joke. About your appetite at Sunday dinners. Nicole said it once and I laughed and then it just stuck. Couple of years." I set down my fork. "You've been calling me a whale for 2 years. It wasn't meant to be cruel. It was just God. It sounds horrible when I say it out loud. Sounds horrible because it is horrible." I took another bite of pie, forcing myself to eat normally despite the knot in my stomach. "Do the girls know what?" "No, of course." But something in his expression made me doubt that. "Are you sure? Because children pick up on more than we think they do." He shifted uncomfortably. "Madison asked Nicole once Grandma always ate so much food. Nicole told her that some people don't know when to stop eating and it's not polite to comment on it. My granddaughter, my sweet Madison, learning to see me through her mother's critical lens. Learning that Grandma was someone who didn't know when to stop. Someone it wasn't polite to comment on, but perfectly acceptable to judge silently." "What about Olivia?" "Olivia is only 7. She doesn't really notice things like that yet, but she would give it another year or 2 and Olivia would start seeing me the way her parents saw me, the way her sister was already learning to see me." "I need to tell you something," I said. "Had lunch with Charles Morrison this week." Daniel looked confused by the topic change. "Your old boss, how is he?" "He's fine. He offered me a job." "A job?" Daniel's eyebrows shot up. "Mom, you're retired." "I'm 63, Daniel, not 93. I'm perfectly capable of working. But why would you want to? You have your pension, your savings. You don't need the money. I could see him calculating in his head, probably wondering if my taking a job would somehow affect his inheritance. The thought made me sick. Maybe I need the purpose, I said. Maybe I need to remember who I am besides your wail of a mother. He flinched. Don't say that. Why not? It's what you call me. I said I was sorry. No, actually you didn't. You said Dad would be ashamed of you, and you said you've been a coward, but you never actually said you were sorry. We sat in silence for a moment. Around us, the diner hummed with ordinary life. Other families having normal conversations, couples sharing dessert, teenagers laughing over milkshakes. All of them treating each other with basic human dignity. I'm sorry, Daniel said finally. I'm sorry I called you names. I'm sorry I let Nicole influence how I treat you. I'm sorry I haven't been the son Dad raised me to be. It was a start. Not enough, but a start. The job Charles offered me, I continued. It's helping seniors who were victims of financial fraud, using my old skills as a forensic accountant to trace stolen money and build cases against the scammers. That sounds, he paused. And I could see him struggling to find the right response. That sounds really meaningful. It is. It's exactly the kind of work I used to love. The kind of work that made me feel valuable and competent. The implication hung in the air between us. I used to feel valuable. Past tense, before I became the whale who showed up every Sunday and dominated conversations and got in everyone's way. Mom, I want things to be different. Daniel said, I want to fix this. Oh. Oh no. Tell me what you need. Tell me how to make this right. Thought about it. Really thought about it. What did I need? What would make Sunday dinners bearable again? What would restore some measure of respect and dignity to our relationship? I need you to see me, I said finally. Not as a burden or a problem or an obligation. As a person with feelings and worth and something to contribute, I need you to stop letting Nicole mock me. And I need you to stop participating in that mockery. Yes, I can do that. And I need you to understand that I won't be available every Sunday anymore. I have a life to rebuild, work to do, self-respect to recover. He looked stricken. You're going to stop coming to dinner. I'm going to come when I'm invited and wanted, not when I'm tolerated. There's a difference. Daniel was quiet for a long time, processing this. I finished my pie slowly, deliberately, refusing to rush or apologize for enjoying my food. What do I tell Nicole? He asked finally. Tell her that your mother is no longer willing to be the entertainment at your dinner table. You tell her that jokes about my weight, my appetite, or my social life are off limits. And you tell her that if she can't treat me with basic respect, she won't have to worry about me getting in her way in the kitchen anymore. His face went pale. She'll be furious. Then she'll be furious. Daniel, you're a grown man with 2 children. You can choose to let your wife dictate how you treat your mother, or you can choose to be the man your father raised you to be. But you can't do both. I stood up and put money on the table for my coffee and pie. Daniel reached for his wallet, but I shook my head. Got it, I said. Consider it. Practice for taking care of myself. Wait. He stood up too, panic in his voice. What happens now? What happens to us? I looked at my son, this man I had raised, loved, sacrificed for, and felt a mixture of sadness and hope. Sadness for what we had lost, hope for what we might still salvage. That depends on you, I said. On both of you, on whether you can learn to love me without diminishing me. I left him standing there in Murphy's diner, probably wondering how a conversation that was supposed to fix our relationship had ended with me walking away. But some things couldn't be fixed with apologies alone. Some things required fundamental changes in behavior, in attitude, in the basic respect one human being showed another. As I drove home, I thought about Madison asking why Grandma ate so much food. I thought about Olivia, still innocent, but learning every day from her parents' example. Thought about the choice I was making to stop enabling their disrespect by accepting it silently. For the first time in years, I felt like I was doing something my husband would be proud of. Harold had never called anyone names. He had never mocked people for their appetites or their loneliness or their need for connection. He had treated everyone, servers at restaurants, checkout clerks at grocery stores, elderly neighbors, with the same basic courtesy and respect. He would have been ashamed of Daniel, but he would have been proud of me for finally standing up for myself. It was a place to start. Sunday came and went without a dinner invitation. I spent the day organizing my home office, pulling out old financial records and refreshing my memory on forensic accounting principles. It felt good to use my brain for something other than worrying about family dynamics. Monday morning I called and accepted a job. By Tuesday, I was sitting in a conference room with 3 other volunteers, reviewing boxes of financial documents from the fraud victims. The work was exactly what I needed: complex, challenging, and completely unrelated to my weight or my appetite or my social skills. Mrs. Ella Patchett was 78 years old and had lost her entire retirement savings to a smooth-talking financial advisor who promised impossible returns. As I traced the money trail through her bank statements, I felt the familiar surge of indignation that always fueled my best work. Someone had deliberately targeted this sweet old woman, exploiting her trust and her fear of poverty. It was my job to help get her money back. "You're good at this," said Janet, one of the other volunteers, watching me reorganize Ella Lehner's statements into chronological order. "How long did you do forensic accounting?" 30 years, I said, highlighting a suspicious transfer in yellow. "I retired 4 years ago, but I guess some skills don't fade. Why did you come back?" I looked up from the statements. I needed to remember who it was. Janet nodded as if that made perfect sense, and I realized it did. For the first time in years, I was in a room where my value wasn't measured by how little space I took up or how quietly I could make myself disappear. Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang while I was deep in a particularly tangled web of fake investment accounts. "Mom." Daniel's voice was strained, urgent. "Are you busy?" "I'm at work," I said, not looking up from the spreadsheet on my laptop screen. "What's wrong?" "Work." "You mean that volunteer thing?" "I mean work." "What's wrong, Daniel?" Can you come over, please? Nicole's having some friends over tonight and she really wants you here. She specifically asked me to invite you." Something in his tone set off alarm bells. "What kind of friends?" "Just people from her book club. They're coming for dinner." And Nicole thought it would be nice to have 3 generations represented. You, me, and Nicole, the girls. Like a real family gathering. 3 generations. Real family gathering. As if our usual Sunday dinners were somehow fake or incomplete without an audience of strangers. "The time?" I asked, already knowing I shouldn't agree to this. 6:30, and Mom. Nicole's trying a new recipe. Something fancy. She's been cooking all day. What should I bring? Nothing. Just be yourself. Be myself. The instruction felt loaded with meaning I wasn't sure I wanted to unpack. I finished my work at for 30 and drove home to change clothes. Standing in front of my closet, I found myself second-guessing every choice. The blue dress was too formal. The black pants made me look bigger. The floral blouse was too cheerful. Finally, I settled on a simple gray sweater and navy slacks. Inoffensive, unremarkable, designed to help me blend into the background. It wasn't until I was putting on my shoes that I realized what I was doing. I was dressing to disappear. To take up as little space as possible to avoid giving Nicole any ammunition for her private commentary later. The realization made me angry. I went back to my closet and pulled out a burgundy sweater I hadn't worn in months. It was beautiful, flattering, and made me feel confident. Harold had always said it. Brought out the color of my eyes. If Nicole's book club friends were going to meet 3 generations of the family, they might as well meet the real me. I arrived at Daniel's house at exactly 6:30. The driveway was full of cars I didn't recognize, and I could hear laughter and conversation through the front windows. Nicole answered the door, wearing a black cocktail dress and perfect makeup. "Barbara," she exclaimed, her voice pitched slightly higher than usual. "You look lovely. Come in. Come in. Everyone's dying to meet you." Everyone was dying to meet me. That should have been flattering. But something in Nicole's manner made my stomach clench with uneasiness. The living room was full of well-dressed women in their 30s and 40s holding wine glasses and making polite conversation. Daniel was in the kitchen frantically stirring something on the stove while Madison and Olivia sat at the dining table, unusually quiet and well-behaved. "Ladies," Nicole called out, clapping her hands for attention. "Like you to meet Daniel's mother, Barbara. Barbara, this is my book club. Jennifer, Susan, Patricia, and Amanda." 4 pairs of eyes turned to evaluate me, taking in my burgundy sweater, my gray hair, my size. Their smiles were polite but assessing. The way women look at each other when they're already primed with information. "So nice to meet you," Jennifer said. "Nicole talks about you all the time." "All good things, I hope," I replied automatically. "Oh, absolutely," Susan chimed in. She says, "You're such a devoted grandmother that you never miss a family dinner." There was something odd about the way she emphasized certain words, as if she were reciting lines from a script. I looked around the room and noticed that everyone was watching me with the same expectant expression. "Mom," Daniel called from the kitchen, his voice tight with stress. "Could you help me with the gravy? It's not thickening properly." Excused myself and went to the kitchen, grateful for the temporary escape. Daniel was standing over the stove, whisking a thin, lumpy mixture that bore no resemblance to gravy. "What happened to it?" I asked, taking the whisk from his hands. "I don't know. Nicole's been directing everything from the living room, and I think I added the cornstarch wrong." I tasted the mixture and nearly winced. Too much salt, too much cornstarch, not enough fat. It was a disaster. "Do you have more chicken stock?" I asked. "And butter." For the next 10 minutes, I worked to salvage the gravy while Daniel hovered anxiously. I could hear Nicole's laughter from the living room, punctuated by comments I couldn't quite make out, but that seemed to involve my name. "There," I said, finally, handing Daniel a spoon to taste the corrected gravy. "That should work." His relief was palpable. "Mom, you're a lifesaver. Nicole would have killed me if I ruined her dinner party." Dinner party. So that's what this was. Not a casual book club gathering, but a dinner party where I was supposed to play some role I didn't understand. We served dinner at 7:15. Nicole had prepared salmon with some kind of elaborate sauce, roasted vegetables, and rice pilaf. It was beautifully presented, and she made a point of describing each dish as if she were hosting a cooking show. "The salmon is wild caught from Alaska," she explained. "And I made the sauce from scratch using fresh herbs from my garden." The book club ladies oh-oh'd and awed appropriately. I took small portions of everything, hyper-aware that 4 strangers were observing my plate, my eating habits, my table manners. "Barbara," Jennifer said about halfway through the meal. "Nicole tells us you used to work in accounting." "Forensic accounting," I corrected, "for a law firm." "How interesting. And now you're retired." "Actually, I just started working again part-time, helping seniors who've been victims of financial fraud." I caught Nicole's slight frown at this information. Clearly, my return to work wasn't part of whatever narrative she'd constructed about me for her friends. "That sounds very rewarding," Patricia said. "Must be nice to feel useful again." Feel useful again. The implication that I hadn't been useful during my retirement hung in the air like smoke. "I've always felt useful," I said quietly, just in different ways. Course, Susan jumped in quickly. "Nicole says you're wonderful with the girls, that you're always available to babysit when they need you." Always available. Another loaded phrase. I glanced at Daniel, who was focused intently on his salmon, avoiding eye contact. The conversation continued in this vein, seemingly innocent questions and comments that felt like tiny cuts, each one designed to reinforce a particular image of me. The devoted but slightly pathetic grandmother. The retiree with too much time on her hands. The woman who lived for other people's schedules and needs. And then Jennifer asked the question I realized they'd all been building toward. "Barbara, Nicole mentioned that you usually come to dinner every Sunday. That must be such a comfort to you having family close by." Set down my fork and looked directly at Nicole. Her cheeks were slightly flushed, and she was smiling that bright false smile I'd learned to recognize over the years. "Actually," I said, "I've been reevaluating my Sunday routine. I've discovered I enjoy having more flexibility in my schedule." Amanda leaned forward with interest. "Are you taking up new hobbies, joining social groups?" The question was innocent enough, but something in her tone suggested she already knew the answer or thought she did. "I'm working," I said, "and I'm rediscovering old friendships. Charles Morrison, my former boss, and I had lunch last week. It was lovely to catch up with him." I watched Nicole's expression shift from surprise to something that looked almost like alarm. This was not the script she'd written for the evening. "Charles Morrison," Patricia repeated. "Wasn't he some sort of lawyer?" "Senior partner at Morrison Klein & Associates," I said. "One of the most respected law firms in the state. I worked there for 30 years. The dynamic at the table shifted subtly. These women were all professionals. I'd learned during dinner that Jennifer was a marketing executive. Susan worked in HR. Patricia was a real estate agent. And Amanda was a nurse practitioner. The idea that I'd had a 30-year career at a prestigious law firm changed their perception of me, and I could see them recalibrating. 30 years, Susan said thoughtfully. "You must have seen some interesting cases, fascinating cases. Corporate fraud, money laundering, complex divorces involving hidden assets. I specialized in following paper trails that other people thought were impossible to trace." Nicole was gripping her wine glass so tightly I was afraid. My break. Daniel was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before. "That sounds incredibly challenging," Jennifer said with genuine interest. "And you're doing similar work now with the fraud victims." Exactly. It's pro bono work, but it's some of the most satisfying investigative accounting I've ever done. For the next 20 minutes, I found myself in actual conversation. Not performance, not entertainment, not serving as the butt of subtle jokes. These women were asking real questions about my work, sharing their own professional experiences, treating me like an equal. Nicole grew quieter and quieter as the evening progressed, and I could see her mentally scrambling to adjust whatever narrative she'd planned for the night. When the dinner party ended at 9:30, I helped Daniel clear the table while Nicole walked her guests to the door. I could hear fragments of their conversations, praise for the salmon, compliments on the wine selection, and comments about how interesting I was. Interesting. Not pathetic or needy or burdensome. Interesting. Mom, Daniel said quietly as we loaded the dishwasher. I had no idea you were doing such important work. Never asked, I said simply. He was quiet for a moment. Nicole seemed surprised. Tonight by some of the things you said. I looked at him directly. What exactly? Did Nicole tell her friends about me, Daniel? He shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. I mean, I wasn't part of those conversations, but something in his expression told me he knew more than he was admitting. Before I could press him further, Nicole reappeared in the kitchen. Well, she said brightly. Went well, don't you think? Everyone seemed to enjoy themselves. It was lovely, I said. Your friends are very. Yes, they are. She began wiping down counters that were already clean. Hope you didn't mind me telling them about your situation. My situation, being widowed, being retired, being available for family time. There it was. My situation, not my life. Not my choices, not my circumstances. My situation, as if being widowed and retired were problems to be managed, rather than simply facts about my current chapter. Actually, I said, I think there might be some confusion about how available I am these days. The forensic accounting work is quite demanding. Nicole's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, though, I hope it won't interfere with family time. The girls so look forward to their Sundays with Grandma. It was a masterful move using my granddaughters as emotional leverage, reminding me that my presence was valuable to someone. Even if that someone was only 7 and 9 years old, the girls are welcome to visit me any time, I said. My schedule is quite flexible on weekends. Oh, Nicole said, clearly not expecting this response. Well, we'll have to see. Sundays work so well for everyone. I kissed Madison and Olivia goodbye and headed toward the front door. Daniel followed me. Mom, he said as I put on my coat, about Sunday. What about it? Should we still plan on dinner? Looked at my son. This man who had just watched me hold my own in a room full of accomplished women who had seen me command respect through my professional experience and competence. And I realized he still didn't understand what needed to change. Daniel, I said gently, when you want to have dinner with me, really want to. Not because Nicole needs entertainment for her friends, or because the girls need supervision, or because I'm part of some 3-generation tableau. Call me. We'll make plans. What about this Sunday? This Sunday I have other plans. I left him standing in the doorway, probably wondering what other plans I could possibly have. But as I drove home, I realized I did have plans. I had work to do, self-respect to rebuild, and a life to reclaim. And for the first time in 4 years, Sunday felt like a day of possibility rather than performance. The call came at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. I was sitting at my kitchen table surrounded by Eleanor Patchett's financial records when Daniel's name flashed on my phone screen. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Mom, thank God. I've been trying to reach you since 8 this morning. There was genuine panic in his voice, the kind of fear that immediately triggered my maternal instincts. What's wrong? Are the girls hurt? No. Everyone's fine. It's just Nicole planned this big Sunday dinner. She invited her parents and her sister's family. She's been cooking since yesterday, and she specifically wanted you here to meet everyone. I set down my highlighter and rubbed my temples. Daniel, you can't call me 3 hours before a dinner party and expect me to drop everything, but you always come to Sunday dinner. Nicole was counting on you being here. Always. There was that word again. The assumption that my presence was guaranteed, that I existed in a state of permanent availability for their convenience. I told you I had other plans today, I said calmly. Plans? What could you possibly be doing that's more important than family? The question hung in the air between us, loaded with all the assumptions Nicole had fed him over the years. That I was lonely, isolated, desperate for their company. That my life outside their family circle was empty and meaningless. I'm working on the Patchett case, I said. Ella Lehner is 78 years old and she lost $60,000 to a financial advisor who targeted senior citizens. I'm trying to trace where her money went so the prosecutor can build a stronger case against him. Daniel struggled for words. That's volunteer work, Mom. It's not like you have to be there at a specific time. Actually, I do. Charles is presenting our preliminary findings to the district attorney tomorrow morning, and I need to have the financial analysis completed today. Can't someone else do it? No, Daniel. Someone else can't do it. This is specialized work that requires specific expertise. My expertise. There was silence on the other end of the phone. I could picture him in his kitchen, probably pacing while Nicole hovered nearby. Both of them unable to comprehend that I had professional obligations that took priority over their social arrangements. Nicole's really upset, he said finally. He told her family all about you and they're excited to meet you. Her father specifically asked about your accounting background after she mentioned it at the dinner party. So Nicole had talked to her family about me. I wondered what version of me she'd presented to them. The professional woman who'd commanded respect from her book club friends, or the needy widow who lived for Sunday dinners and ate too much food. I'm sorry Nicole is upset, I said. But this is exactly what I was talking about at Murphy's Diner. You can't assume I'm available just because I used to be available. But it's family, Mom. Family comes first, does it? Yes. 'Cause when I needed my family to treat me with basic respect, to stop making jokes about my weight and my eating habits, family didn't seem to come first. Then another silence. Longer this time. That's different, he said quietly. No, Daniel. It's not. It's exactly the same. It's about priorities and respect and treating people like human beings instead of convenient accessories. Could hear voices in the background. Nicole talking rapidly, probably coaching Daniel on what to say next. Mom, listen. What if we postpone dinner until next Sunday? That way you can finish your work and Nicole can meet with her family when you're available. Daniel, I said gently. I need you to hear what I'm telling you. I will not be available every Sunday anymore. If you want to have dinner with me, you need to call and ask if I'm free like you would with any other adult in your life. But we've always done Sunday dinners and we can still do Sunday dinners some Sundays when we've made plans in advance and I don't have other commitments. What other commitments could you possibly have? The words slipped out before he could stop them, revealing exactly what he thought. Of my life outside his family. Daniel, I said, and something in my tone made him go quiet. I'm 63 years old. Have friends, interests, responsibilities, and a professional life. I have book club meetings and volunteer work and doctor's appointments and grocery shopping and house maintenance and all the ordinary activities that make up a full adult life. I know that. But no, you don't know that. You think I sit in this house all week waiting for Sunday to arrive so I can come to your dinner table and be the entertainment. Think my entire existence revolves around your family's schedule. That's not true, isn't it? When was the last time you called me just to ask how I was doing? When was the last time you invited me to something because you wanted my company? Not because Nicole needed an extra guest or the girls needed supervision. He was quiet for so long I thought he might have hung up. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Oh no. I don't know either, and that's the problem. I heard Nicole's voice in the background, more urgent. Well, Daniel covered the phone, but I could still make out fragments of their conversation. Something about the dinner being ruined, about how they'd look to her family, about me being selfish and unreasonable. Mom, Daniel said when he came back on line. Nicole says she'll call you herself to explain how important this is. Please don't let her do that, I said. Quickly. Daniel, this conversation needs to be between you and me. This is about our relationship, not about Nicole's dinner party. But she's my wife. We're a family. Yes, you are. And I'm your mother. And until you figure out how to balance those relationships in a way that doesn't require me to sacrifice my dignity, we're going to continue having problems. I could hear Nicole in the background, her voice rising with frustration. Something about me being dramatic, about making everything about myself, about ruining what was supposed to be a special day. Have to go, Daniel said. I need to deal with this situation. This situation. Not I need to talk to my wife about treating my mother with respect. Not I need to figure out how to balance my family relationships better. I need to deal with this situation as if I were a problem to be solved rather than a person to be considered. Daniel, wait. What? I love Madison and Olivia. And someday I hope we can have a relationship based on mutual respect instead of obligation and guilt. But until that day comes, I won't be the whale at your dinner table anymore. I hung up before he could respond. For the next hour, I tried to focus on Ella Lehner's financial records, but my hands were shaking too badly to hold the highlighter steady. I kept thinking about Nicole's family gathered around the dinner table, probably hearing all about the difficult mother-in-law who had ruined their special meal by refusing to show up. At 12:30 my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Madison and Olivia standing on my front porch, still dressed in their Sunday outfits. Madison was holding a covered dish, and Olivia was clutching a small bouquet of flowers. I opened the door and Madison immediately stepped forward. Grandma, we brought you some of Mom's dinner, she said, holding up the dish. She made your favorite chicken marsala. It wasn't my favorite. Never told Nicole it was my favorite, but I had complimented it once years ago, trying to be polite. And somehow, that had become Grandma's favorite dish in family lore. That's very sweet of you girls. Where are your parents? Daddy's waiting in the car, Olivia said, pointing to Daniel's SUV parked at the curb. He said we could only stay for a minute. I looked past them to the car where I could see Daniel behind the wheel. His phone pressed to his ear, probably getting instructions from Nicole on exactly what the girls should say. Come in, I said, stepping aside to let them enter. But only if you want to, not because someone told you to. Madison looked confused. What do you mean? I knelt down to their level, looking into their sweet, innocent faces. These beautiful children who were learning day by day how to treat people from their parents' example. Mean that. I want you to visit me because you want to spend time with me, not because your parents are upset about something. We do want to spend time with you, Madison said earnestly. We always want to spend time with you. Even though I eat too much food, I asked gently. Both girls looked startled. Olivia glanced at Madison, who bit her lower lip. Mom says some people don't know when to stop eating, Madison said carefully, as if reciting a lesson, but that it's not polite to talk about it. And what do you think about that? Madison considered this seriously. I think people should eat however much they want, like at buffet. You're supposed to eat lots of different things at buffets. Out of the mouths of babes. A 9-year-old had a better understanding of basic human dignity than her parents did. You know what? Said, standing up. Why don't you tell your daddy that you're going to stay here for a while? We can have our own Sunday dinner, just the three of us. Can we really? Olivia bounced on her toes with excitement. Of course, but only if you want to. I'm not going to make you stay if you'd rather go back to your parents' dinner party. We want to stay, Madison said. Immediately, the grown-ups were all talking about boring stuff. Anyway, I walked them out to Daniel's car where he was still on the phone with someone. When he saw us approaching, he quickly ended the call and rolled down the window. Mom, I can't talk right now. Nicole's family is asking where you are, and I don't know what to tell them. Tell them I had other plans, I said. The girls would like to stay here for a few hours. I'll bring them home before bedtime. I don't think that's a good idea. Nicole wants them at the dinner. Why? So they can sit quietly while the adults ignore them. Let them have some fun for once. Madison stepped closer to the car. Please, Daddy. Grandma's going to make us a special dinner. Daniel looked torn. Could see him weighing his wife's expectations against his daughter's obvious enthusiasm. What time will you bring them home? He asked finally. 6 o'clock, I said. That gives us the whole afternoon. Mom, about earlier. Not now, Daniel. Not in front of the girls. We'll talk later. He nodded reluctantly and drove away, probably dreading the conversation he was about to have with Nicole about her missing dinner guests. But I didn't care about Nicole's disappointment or her family's confusion. For the first time in months, I had my granddaughters to myself without the pressure of performing for their parents or walking on eggshells around Nicole's critical commentary. So I said, putting my arms around both girls, what should we make for our special Sunday dinner? Can we make pancakes? Olivia asked hopefully. For dinner? Madison looked scandalized. Why not? Said. It's our dinner. We can make whatever we want. And we did. We made chocolate chip pancakes and bacon and fresh fruit salad. We set the table with my good china and cloth napkins. We lit candles and pretended we were dining in a fancy restaurant. Most importantly, we really talked about school and friends and books and movies and dreams. Madison told me about her science project on butterflies. Olivia demonstrated her newest gymnastics moves. They asked me about my work and I explained how I help people get their stolen money back. You're like a detective, Madison said clearly. Impressed. That's exactly what I am, I agreed. Financial detective. For 4 hours, I wasn't the whale or the burden or the obligation. I was just grandma, making pancakes for dinner and listening to my granddaughter's stories with complete attention. When Daniel came to Pick them up at 6. The girls hugged me tightly and begged to come back next weekend. We'll see, I said, glancing at their father. Grandma might be busy next weekend. But we could help with your detective work, Madison suggested earnestly. Daniel looked surprised. Detective work. Grandma catches bad guys who steal money from old people. Olivia explained proudly. She's really good at it, Madison added. He showed us how to find patterns in numbers. I watched Daniel process this information, seeing me through his daughter's eyes for perhaps the first time in years, not as a needy widow desperate for family time, but as a competent professional doing meaningful work. That sounds very important, he said quietly. It is important, Madison said firmly. Grandma's helping Mrs. Patchett get her money back. After they left, I cleaned up our impromptu dinner party and returned to Eleanor's financial records. But I found it easier to concentrate now, energized by an afternoon of unconditional love and genuine conversation. My phone didn't ring for the rest of the evening, no desperate calls from Daniel, no passive-aggressive messages from Nicole, just blessed silence and the satisfaction of work that mattered. For the first time in 4 years, I had spent a Sunday exactly the way I wanted to spend it. It felt like the beginning of something new, something better, something that belonged entirely to me. 3 weeks passed without a word from Daniel or Nicole. I threw myself into the fraud case, and Charles was delighted with my work. We traced Eleanor's stolen money through 6 different shell companies and identified 2 other scams the same financial advisor had been running simultaneously. Barbara, this is extraordinary work, Charles said, reviewing my final report. The district attorney says this evidence will likely put Marcus Hendley away for 15 years minimum. I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with family approval or dinner invitations. This was the kind of achievement that couldn't be diminished by cruel jokes or casual dismissal. Ella Laner Patchett would get most of her money back because of my work. There's something else, Charles continued. I've been talking to colleagues about your skills. There are 3 more cases that could use your expertise. Are you interested in taking on more clients, more work, more purpose, more reasons to fill my calendar with meaningful activities? Absolutely, I said. That afternoon I was organizing my files when the doorbell rang. Through the peephole I saw Madison and Olivia with their backpacks looking smaller and more uncertain than they had 3 weeks ago. I opened the door and Madison immediately stepped forward. Grandma, can we come in? We walked here from school. That was nearly 2 and they were only 9 and 7 years old. Course, sweetheart. Are your parents expecting you somewhere? Mom's at her book club, Madison said, following me into the kitchen. And Daddy's working late again. Does anyone know where you are? The girls exchanged a look that told me everything I needed to know. They had taken it upon themselves to visit me without permission because they missed me. We told Mrs. Peterson next door that we were going to Grandma's house, Olivia said. She said that was nice. Mrs. Peterson was Daniel's elderly neighbor who sometimes watched the girls when Daniel and Nicole had evening plans. Was a sensible woman who would probably mention the girls' visit to Daniel eventually. But for now they were my secret visitors. Are you hungry? Yes. Already knowing the answer. Children were always hungry after school. Starving, Olivia said dramatically. Mom made us protein smoothies for lunch, but they tasted like grass. I made them grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup while they told me about their day. Madison had gotten an A on her butterfly project. Olivia had learned to do a cartwheel in gym class. Normal, wonderful kid. Conversations that I had missed desperately. "Grandma," Madison said carefully as she finished her sandwich, "why don't you come to Sunday dinner anymore?" It was the question I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "Well," I said, choosing my words carefully, "sometimes grown-ups need to change the way they spend their time. I've been very busy with my work." "The detective work," Olivia said, nodding seriously. "That's right. And sometimes, when people don't treat each other kindly, it's better to spend time apart until they can learn to be nicer." Madison frowned. "Did Daddy and Mommy not treat you kindly? How do you explain to a 9-year-old that her parents called you a whale behind your back? How do you tell her that her mother made jokes about your eating habits for the entertainment of strangers?" "Sometimes grown-ups forget to be respectful to each other," I said. "And when that happens, it's important to remind them that everyone deserves to be treated with kindness. Like when Tommy Martinez called me fat on the playground," Madison said thoughtfully. "I told the teacher and she made him apologize exactly like that. But Daddy didn't apologize to you." Out of the mouths of babes again. My granddaughter had identified the core issue more clearly than her 36-year-old father had. "He did apologize," I said. "But sometimes an apology isn't enough. Sometimes people have to show that they've really changed by acting differently. And Daddy hasn't acted differently yet." "Not yet." Madison nodded as if this made perfect sense to her. At 9 years old, she understood something about respect and accountability that the adults in her life were still struggling with. We spent the next 2 hours on homework and art projects. I helped Madison with her math problems while Olivia drew pictures of butterflies inspired by her sister's science project. It was peaceful, ordinary, exactly the kind of grandmother time I had always wanted. 5:30, my phone rang. Daniel's name flashed on the screen, and I could imagine his panic when he'd come home to find the house empty. "They're here," I said before he could speak. "They're safe." "Jesus, Mom, you scared me to death." Nicole called from book club, asking if I'd pick them up early, and when I got home they were gone. "They walked here after school. They wanted to visit. They walked. That's 2 m on busy streets. They could have been hit by a car or kidnapped but they weren't. They're fine, Daniel. They're doing homework at my kitchen table. I'm coming to get them right now." "Course, but Daniel, we need to talk." "No. Been thinking about things about what you said." 20 minutes later, Daniel arrived looking harried and exhausted. The girls hugged him enthusiastically, chattering about their afternoon with me, seemingly oblivious to his stress. "Go pack up your backpacks," he told them. "We need to get home before Mom does." As the girls gathered their things, Daniel sat across from me at the kitchen table, where I'd been helping with homework just an hour before. "Mom, I owe you an apology. Real one." "Waited. I've been thinking about everything you said about how Nicole and I have been treating you, and you're right. We've been awful. Changed your mind." He rubbed his face with both hands. "A lot of things. The girls have been asking about you. Constantly. Every day they want to know when they can see Grandma again, when we're going to have Sunday dinner, why you don't come over anymore. And what do you tell them?" "I've been making excuses, saying you're busy with work, that we'll see you soon. But Madison asked me last week if we made you sad, and I didn't know how to answer." I felt my heart clench. My granddaughter was worried that she had done something wrong. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that grown-ups sometimes have complicated feelings and that it wasn't her fault. But she keeps asking if there's something she can do to fix it." The idea that Madison felt responsible for our family's dysfunction made me want to cry. "Daniel, the girls didn't do anything wrong. This is entirely about how you and Nicole have been treating me. You know. And I want to fix it. I want to do better. What does Nicole think about that? His expression darkened. Nicole thinks you're being dramatic. She thinks you're punishing the whole family because your feelings got hurt. Feelings got hurt. That's not what I think, he said quickly. That's what she thinks. She says the whale comment was just a joke and that you're overreacting. Just a joke. Casual. Cruelty that had defined 2 years of their private conversations about me. Dismissed as harmless humor. Daniel, if someone at your office started calling you names behind your back, making jokes about your appearance or your habits, would you consider that just a joke? That's different. That would be workplace harassment. How is it different? He was quiet for a long moment. Guess it's not. The girls reappeared with their backpacks and Madison hugged me tightly. Can we come back soon, Grandma? I want to show you my new library book. We'll see. Sweetheart, your parents and I need to work some things out first. After they left, I sat in my quiet kitchen thinking about Madison's question. Did Daddy and Mommy not treat you kindly? The simplicity of a child's moral framework, where unkindness was wrong regardless of the relationship between the people involved. My phone rang an hour later. Charles, Barbara, I hope I'm not calling too late. I wanted to let you know that the Hendley indictment came through. The district attorney specifically mentioned your investigative work in the press conference. That's wonderful news. There's more. I just got off the phone with Janet Williams at the State Attorney General's office. She's heading up a new task force on elder fraud and she wants to meet with you about consulting work. Real consulting work. Barbara paid positions with the state. I felt a thrill of excitement that had nothing to do with family relationships or social obligations. This was about my skills, my value as a professional, my ability to make a real difference in people's lives. When does she want to meet? Next Tuesday. At 10 o'clock. Are you interested? Very interested. After I hung up, I looked around my kitchen at the remnants of my afternoon with the girls. Madison's math homework still sat on the table next to Olivia's butterfly drawings, evidence of a relationship built on love and respect, rather than obligation and guilt. The next morning I drove to the farmer's market and bought ingredients for Madison's favorite chocolate chip cookies and the ingredients for Olivia's beloved spaghetti and meatballs. And I called Daniel. I want to invite the girls over for dinner on Saturday. I said, just the girls. You can drop them off at 5 o'clock and pick them up at 8. Mom, I don't think Nicole will. Daniel, I'm not asking Nicole. I'm asking you. Your daughters want to spend time with their grandmother and I want to spend time with them. This has nothing to do with our adult conflicts. He was quiet for a moment. What about me? If I want to spend time with you too? The question caught me off guard. In all our recent conversations, Daniel had been focused on managing the situation, placating Nicole, maintaining peace. This was the first time he'd expressed his own desire to rebuild our relationship. Do you, yes, really want to spend time with me? Or do you just want things to go back to the way they were before? He struggled for words. I want my mom back. I want the relationship we had before I got married. Before I started letting Nicole's opinions matter more than my own judgment. It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. Then here's what's going to happen. I said, Saturday, I'm cooking dinner for my granddaughters. If you'd like to join, you're welcome. But Daniel, if you come as my son who respects me, not as Nicole's husband who's managing a difficult situation. What does that mean? Means no comments about what I'm serving or how much anyone eats. It means no recording anything for social media or treating this like a performance. It means having a normal family dinner where everyone is valued and respected. What about Nicole? What about her? Should I invite her? I thought about Nicole's book club friends, about the dinner party where I'd been expected to play the role of the pathetic grandmother. I thought about 2 years of whale jokes and constant commentary about my eating habits. Nicole is welcome in my home when she can treat me with the same respect she shows strangers. I said until then she's not welcome. Mom, that's harsh. Daniel, your wife spent 2 years calling me a whale. She made jokes about my weight and my loneliness for the entertainment of her friends. She turned our family dinners into performance art, where I was the comic relief. If you think establishing boundaries around that behavior is harsh, then you still don't understand what this is about. He was quiet for a long time. Can I think about it about Saturday? Course. But Daniel, I need you to understand something. I'm not the same woman who used to accept being treated poorly just to maintain family peace. Remembered who I am outside of your family's expectations. And I like her. I'm not going back to being the whale at anyone's dinner table ever again. You were never. Yes, I was. For 2 years I was exactly that. Your whale of a mother who devoured all the food and dominated conversations and got in everyone's way. But I'm not that anymore. Saturday evening, I set my dining room table for 3 good china, cloth napkins, fresh flowers from my garden. The spaghetti sauce simmered on the stove and the garlic bread was ready for the oven. Exactly 5 o'clock, Daniel's car pulled into my driveway. I watched through the window as he got out with the girls, looking uncertain but determined. All 3 of them were coming to dinner. I opened the door before they could ring the bell, and Madison launched herself into my arms. Grandma, Daddy said, we're having spaghetti and meatballs. And chocolate chip cookies. That's right, sweetheart. Your favorites. Daniel stood in my doorway holding a bouquet of yellow roses. My favorite flowers, the ones Harold used to bring me for special occasions. These are beautiful, I said, accepting the flowers. I remembered that you always loved yellow roses, he said quietly. Used to bring them to you. Yes, he did. As I arranged the roses in a vase, I felt something shift in the atmosphere. Daniel wasn't here to manage a situation or plate his wife. He was here because he wanted to be here. Dinner was exactly what I'd hoped it would be. Conversation instead of performance, laughter instead of judgment. The girls told stories about school while Daniel asked thoughtful questions about my work with the Attorney General's office. Proud of you, Mom, he said as Olivia demonstrated her latest gymnastics moves in the living room. I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. You're doing important work and I'm proud to be your son. It was the acknowledgement I'd been waiting for. Without realizing it. Not just an apology for past behavior, but recognition of my value, my competence, my worth as a person beyond my role as wife, mother, and grandmother. What happens now? He asked as we loaded the dishwasher together. With us, I mean now we build something new, I said. Something based on mutual respect, instead of obligation. And Nicole will make her own choices just like you're making yours. As they prepared to leave, Madison hugged me tightly. Can we do this again next week? She asked hopefully. We'll see, I said, glancing at Daniel. I'd like that, he said. If you'll have us. After they left, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea, looking at the yellow roses Daniel had brought me. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel me. It felt peaceful, complete, exactly as it should be. My phone buzzed. With a text from Charles. How did the family dinner go? Type. Perfectly, for the first time in years, perfectly. I had reclaimed my dignity, rebuilt my professional identity, and established boundaries that protected my self-respect. Most importantly, I had taught my granddaughters that love should never require someone to accept cruelty. The table was set for respect now, not performance, and everyone who sat at it would be welcomed with the same dignity. I demanded for myself. It had taken me 63 years to learn that lesson, but it was never too late to start living it. The story continues in the next chapter in the next linked video. But first, I need you to subscribe to join the family, as we are looking forward to hit our first 10,000 subscribers target, and feel free to share your story in the comments. You matter, your voice does too.